It's a real pleasure to be back here in Jindabyne. Again, I've been up quite a few times for Business Connect over the last 6 months. And across my life, I've been coming to Jindabyne and the mountains quite a bit. I first came when I was quite young, and I remember learning as a child that you cannot walk across a frozen creek. You go through it. That was probably my first lesson here. The second was that Mum's tin tray made a great toboggan until we outgrew the toboggan slide. So I've been coming here for a long time because my farm and my farm is down on the coast near Bega, and that's where I grew up. So we used to come up here on holidays, and when I was at high school in Bega High, we came up in year 12 to study karst topography. So I've walked the mountains here quite a lot, looking at just about every feature related to karsts that there was. When I left high school, you had to go away for study and you had to go away for work. There was an alternative. So I went away and I studied, and then I worked. I originally worked as a teacher in high school. I worked in the environment, did a number of environmental impact statements and received some awards for those. I was a program manager and operated a business over time. I ended up managing a company where I had 400 people reporting to me across Papua New Guinea, the Pacific and Australia. And after some time, I came home in 2005 once we got satellite internet, and I was able to come back to my parents' farm, and so that's where I came back. When I came back, what I realised was that our children still had to go away. They couldn't stay if they wanted to get work. There wasn't that option. And that's what made me decide to run for politics. 2 minutes? Good. That's what made me decide to run, because what I realised in what I'd been doing while I'd been away, I had the skills and the knowledge to know how to go about addressing the problem and changing it. And I didn't want to find that in another 30 years, our children still had to go away for work. Because what it's doing is it's actually bleeding our love, by the way. There are so many issues across here. We have our problems up here in Jindabyne in terms of how do we keep the community that you've got. You've got a great community, but you're growing. So how do you keep the very reasons why you have moved here? It's all about community and keeping our communities alive. I know community, I love it. I'm in the RFS at home. I'm a member of our Anglican Church. I've been a lifeline counsellor for 10 years, a youth line counsellor. I was in the Army Reserve for 8 years, and I'm an Oxfam director, so I believe very much in community. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And thank you for reminding us what fun a box can be. Thank you. Fiona Quatfoy is our Liberal candidate for Eda Monaro. Our next speaker is an independent candidate, James Holgate.
Very much. Good to be in Jindabyne. I'm born and bred in Coomera. I used to come through Jindabyne very, very, very often. Skiing, I did a lot of skiing as a kid. In fact, worked as a lifty and then a ski instructor for a little while, shortly after leaving school. The reason I'm running is, well, I've studied politics and policy studies. I've lived overseas for between 3 and 4 years in Singapore, the Federated States of Micronesia, in Myanmar, or what was then known as Burma, and most recently in Trinidad and Tobago. I actually spent some time working with a joint operation in Bougainville, the peacekeeping monitoring group, which I mentioned earlier, if we're going to virtue signal around here. But look, I've got a great, I think I've got a good perspective. I've got a real interest in politics, and I've always voted for the major parties, but I think the message I'm getting around when I went around to get my signatures, was that there is a lot of disenchantment, I think, with the major parties. And I think a large part of the problem is political donations. I think there are a lot of debates that are not had. I mean, it came to mind today, after the GFC and after the Banking recent Royal Commission, how many bankers have actually gone to jail? If you go and steal $200, you end up in jail. Steal millions, nothing happens. And I think there's a sort of, I don't know, a code of silence, I don't know what it is. But anyway, there's a lot of cynicism, and I think I can actually bring real life experience. I haven't been a politician. I'm of an age now, I've lived in a lot of places. I can compare a lot of other countries with varying levels of democracy. We have got a great country here. There are things we can do better. Another thing I'd like to do is have an Australian head of state. I was almost tempted to run as an independent in the recent state election over the issue of the trampling over any semblance of an integrated feral animal management plan. And I think that was party politics that got to that. I think that's an embarrassment. I think it's an international disgrace. I think it should be illegal. They're going to put my cards on the table there. But in any event, if you vote for me, I'm pragmatic, I'm thoughtful, I've got a lot of experience. I can introduce you to my team of advisors. Anything that I agree basically with the principle, a liberal principle, a small L liberal, I like to be left alone, get on with business, less interference. I like the social agenda of Labor as well. I think a lot of progressive social issues, going back to the Whitlam years, I agree with. Philosophically, I'm very aligned with the Greens. I like to have a small carbon footprint. Sorry I have to drive up here today, but look, I've got a lot to offer, I know. Been through here, I've done a lot of skiing. I've noticed the snow line has followed, my hairline's followed the snow line. It's actually receded. When I was a kid, I'd come up here, you'd get snow down to Sawpit Creek. Generally, now it's up near Dana's Gap, I drive up to Perisher Light. You might still get good snow, but it's higher up. I mean, climate change is real, it is getting warmer, it seems to me, but we can't do anything on our own as Australia, 1.3% of greenhouse gas emissions. I could go on, but I won't. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, James. Lifty elected to Parliament. That would be a great headline, wouldn't it? Come May 18. We'll see. James Holgate, our independent candidate. Our next speaker is the current sitting member representing the Labor Party, the member for Eda Monaro, Mike Kelly.
It's great to be back here and in good company. This is a very quality team, I think, that in this election, so I congratulate them all for participating. I think you know most of my backstory. This is a region that means a great deal to me. The family's been in the region for over 180 years now. In fact, our first family farm was on the Snowy River here in the 1830s. And so this area has special significance to me. And I think it was one of the reasons why when we were elected into government in 2007, I really focused on the potential of this region. And together we worked to achieve a great deal. The $50 million I was able to get for you to restore environmental flows into the Snowy River, working for years with Bruce Hodges and Dean Pendergast of blessed memory on getting the GP Super Clinic here and making sure it was tailor-made for this community, $5 million for that. The social infrastructure that goes with that too, like the $650,000 we got for the sports ground here, which is so important as a vital gathering place for this community, the touch football and the rest. The investment that I put into the mountain bike tracks here because we wanted to even out the tourism year to make sure it was a 50-50 split eventually, and also to deal with the potential problems we might have with loss of the length of the ski season. The money we put into water resource and efficiency efforts and Berrydale treatment plant and the rest, and of course the $100,000 into the waste recycling facility here as well. And of course the millions, the $5.4 million that went into your schools here from our efforts there. So it's a great story of us working together. And of course I want to continue that. But in addition to that, I'm hoping to bring back now the hard-won expertise in government that through the years that I served in various portfolios as Assistant Minister in Water Portfolio, Assistant Minister in the Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry Portfolio, in Defence, and then finishing up as the Minister for Defence Material. And of course also the things that I did after that when I lost the election in 2013, going off working with the United Nations on improving the original peacekeeping approach, and then working for Bill Shorten as his security advisor, and then back in Parliament in 2016, working in things like the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. So I've had 30 years of hard-won experience. I still carry the scars of a lot of it in particularly the security space, literally from all my field experience in defence and working in counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism and human security. And I want to bring that experience back into a new government should we be elected. So I'm hoping obviously to have your support to do that, but there are a lot of local issues here. I was pleased to announce $100,000 for the council here for building more boat ramps to get that summer tourism experience enhanced, and I just announced recently service this area as well, because our kids really need better mental health. So let's get together and keep working on what this community needs. Thank you.
I'm Kelly riding the political roller coaster. Our next speaker, you wearing your green sneakers tonight, Pat? Our next speaker, representing the Greens, I'm not sure whether his sneakers represent politics or his motherland. Pat McGinley from the Greens.
Thank you for that. I don't have motherland anymore, thank you very much. Section 44 ensured that
Thanks for clearing that up.
this person had to renounce their British citizenship at the end of last year. Actually, I only ever felt I was Scottish, not British, so it was not a great loss. I'm sorry to say to any English people here. The Irish is through the name. I was actually born in Scotland in 1955, and at the age of 10, emigrated with my parents to a lovely little town in South Australia called Whyalla, very lush, saltbush. Shipyard, steelworking town. Dad was a tradie, figure and turner. Mum worked in the local hospital as a kitchen maid, and I had a great time growing up in South Aussie. Really loved it. Moved to Canberra, got married along the way, picked up a couple of kids on the way, worked in the public service, also had some prior jobs as a dish pig, washing dishes, cleaning schools at night, selling TVs, working in a news agency, doing the early shift, all the stuff you do. Got myself a degree and joined the public service, got sick of it, started my own business as a training consultant, had great fun doing that. Actually, one of my ex-partners is in the room tonight. We're in partnership. He's a councillor here. This chap down the front, John Castellari, fellow councillor. After the business, I joined the state government through the ACT government, if you like. I've also got experience in local government as the HR manager for Eurobodalla Council down on the South Coast. I'm now currently a councillor in Eurobodalla Shire Council as well. So that's just a quick hodgepodge of how I got around to these sort of things. The council experience, I think, is good value, allied to experience in bureaucracies at state level, federal level, and local level. That juxtaposition of the different legislation and guidelines, knowing that from a bureaucratic perspective is really valuable. I also know how to examine the bureaucracy to see how effective they are, because part of my career included 5 years as a performance auditor with the Australian National Audit Office, auditing the performance of government departments and agencies. Why I'm coming here, the issue of climate change is up front the main issue as far as I'm concerned, not just for this election, okay, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next 10, 11 years is our window of opportunity to take this issue really seriously. It impacts on every other topic that you'll probably talk about tonight. I'll just leave you with that thought.
Thanks, Pat McGinley from the Greens. And our final speaker tonight, Sophie Wade, representing the Nationals.
Hi, I'm Sophie Wade. I'm the Nationals candidate for Eden Monaro. It's lovely to be here tonight. We've got a fabulous turnout. Thank you very much for coming. And of course, thanks to all of the candidates. Won't be a candidate debate without us all turning up. I'm a mother and I'm a wife, and I'm a local for the Monaro electorate, in particular the Yass Valley region, where I live on a farm and have done for well over 10 years. I have 3 children, Abby, Brianna and Rory, all young adults now. We have enjoyed a wonderful life living on a farm and participating in our community. Professionally, I wear many hats. I have a degree in both science and law, and I've practiced as an intellectual property lawyer in Sydney before starting my own IT business. The IT business started as a service business, so I have significant experience in operating services businesses. As we conducted that business, we developed products and moved on to then become a product business that sold our software both locally and internationally. It's given me a lot of exposure to the challenges of running businesses and having staff and maintaining cost flow through the business. How did I come into politics? I am a community advocate. So for the last 6 years, I've run a Barton Highway Community Action Group. That is one of the major highways in our part of the region of Eden-Monaro. There was a very bad number of serious accidents and fatalities. About 6 years ago, we were told by politics at large, I suppose, governments in general, that we would have our road reviewed in 2036 to see what needed to be done. Obviously that was unacceptable, and I think at this point in time I found my voice. So, set up an action group, put together a crowdfunding campaign, ran a campaign, and over that time, with obviously the help of thousands of people in our area, we have achieved $50 million from the state government and $150 million from the federal government, the federal coalition government, and we now, the planning for that road is underway, and we will have shovels in the ground before the end of next year. This experience showed me that you can make a difference, and it also showed me that it's worth fighting. I've been very disappointed with how politics has gone in general. I don't think it represents what the general normal Australian expects. We do not want career politicians. We want people doing things up in Parliament House that reflect what we need in our communities, and we want the policies that are being implemented to adapt to both metropolitan and regional areas. When I was asked to run, I had to think twice. I know it's a huge job, but I believe that we can do better, and I want to do better.
Thanks, Sophie. The other name you'll see on your ballot paper on the 18th of May is Thomas Harris, representing the Christian Democrat Party. Thomas can't be with us tonight. So over to you to start quizzing our candidates. To get us started tonight, we have 3 questions from the Jindabyne Chamber of Commerce. Gordon has our first question for the candidates tonight regarding fair wages.
It's not fair wages, and it's a more flexible wages policy. I guess this relates to how the candidates know the area. This is an area that's tourism's our main industry, and small business is probably the backbone of that tourism industry. I'm hoping that all candidates would have done a little bit of homework and realised that we have the major lifting companies up in the mountains have a very sensible agreement with the wages, union movement for a wages policy. That doesn't go across to small businesses. So you've got the resorts up in the mountains where you've got fairly large companies that are operating under one set of rules, and small businesses are operating under another set of rules. So what it basically is, 38 hours goes over 7 days, not 5 days. So overtime doesn't kick in until you pass 38 hours, whichever of the days it is. Very understandable for the lifting companies. They put a lot of capital into the lift lines and whatever, but when you look at just say a weekend, a holiday weekend where triple time comes into play, you've got little small businesses paying staff triple what one of the staff or the employees in the lifting companies would pay. So anyone that thinks that is fair business. My question to the panel in general is, I would think that a really positive position for us to be in is the area declared a tourism precinct, and you treat the wages in a more flexible way over 7 days, Monday through to Sunday, and I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Who wants to go first? So microphone to move up and down the table. Fiona Cockvoice.
Thanks for the question. This was first raised with me when I first came up to Business Connect last year, and I've been looking at it since then. It is quite complicated. It's a real challenge. There is an inequity when you have people, particularly in Jindabyne, small businesses, trying to compete on a different playing field. And it's really stifling Jindabyne. Now, you can't afford to have a shop down here open on a Sunday, and they are in the mountains. And so what that means is people don't do that shopping down here. So it is a real problem. It's not just a problem here in Jindabyne though. I went and I talked to businesses down on the coast, which have a similar issue because it's also tourist, it's very seasonal, and you need to pick up as much business as you can during that season. They have exactly the same issue. So we do need to deal with it, particularly in places where you have seasonal businesses. It becomes a greater problem, and yes, I will be doing whatever I can to try and address that and to have a form of equity across the area. I don't think it's just going to be a case of saying it is a tourism area here. It's going to be a broader problem to make sure we have equity and you don't have different sets of rules for different players. It's not fair.
Who would like to speak next? Mike Kelly from the Labor Party.
Yeah, obviously that is the key issue for the region here is small businesses are making life better for them, and I think one of the first things I did when we got into government in 2007 was take teams from the resorts here up to meet with our new government about arrangements that needed to be more flexible in relation to the general policy that we had concerning 457 visas, because we have that seasonal workforce who no locals would take on that job because you'd only get to do it for a couple of months, and these are people who travel around the world in winter seasons, etc. So we sorted that issue out. But obviously there are a whole range of things that need to happen to make life easier for small businesses, and you might remember that when we were in government we instituted the instant asset write-off program and the lost carryback program and the BAS Easy program, trying to make the BAS process easier for you, and the Enterprise Connect facilities to try and help businesses to take advantage of technology. Obviously, there are discrepancies in the way the labour market works, and how the reintroduction of penalty rates might apply. But I think it'd actually be better if the entire workforce was unionised, because then we could have proper collective bargaining arrangements that will make flexible to each enterprise. So that's something I think we actually should pursue. It's certainly the way it works in Israel, who they have one big union, they don't have a trade-based union structure, but through their start-up economy, you've got people working in the gig economy now who can become members of that union, and then enterprise and collective agreements can be worked flexibly across the economy, which has been a great advantage to the Israeli economy. So I think we need to be creative in our thinking about all of that, and I hope that we can begin a deeper dialogue to take ideas through to policymakers on how that might work out. I know there's an issue about whether there be different tax treatment for regions, but it could be a much more difficult issue to work through nationally. But I do think there are things that can be done to make this workforce issue more flexible to meet the needs of small businesses.
Thanks, Mike. Pat McGinley from the Greens was next.
Thank you. I do understand the dilemma, and I did get a good briefing from some people in town. Actually walked around and chatted to a few people. We've talked about the complexity of the issue here. There's also a balancing aspect. When the question was introduced, you said it's a question about fair, and you said no, it's about flexibility. I think it's got to be a balance of the two. It's got to be fair and it's got to be flexible. And when I say fair, it's got to be fair to the workers who are going to be subject to these conditions. It's got to be fair to the person who's risking their livelihood by opening a business and trying to make it accessible. And the key thing is the flexibility, and that means that all stakeholders would have to be involved. One of the key stakeholders mentioned by yourself was the fact that the lifting company workers are represented by a union, and they managed to negotiate an agreement that the workers were happy with, the union was happy with, and obviously the industry is happy with. Okay, I would support that approach in these kind of situations. If you can bring the key stakeholders together, the ones I mentioned, the workers, the owners, the unions, the chambers of commerce, and the representatives of the various levels of government, so that we're all on the same page, trying to achieve the outcomes, which is what you're after: prosperity for the small business and equity and fairness for the workers.
Sophie Wade was next, and then Jen Nixon.
absolutely believe there is work to be done in this space. I was here for your Easter, I enjoyed your lake light, and I was at your Connect, where we were shown a list of businesses which would be staying open for Easter, and a list of businesses that were quiet or thought it was actually better to shut. So I saw firsthand the implications of the disparity between the lifting award and the standard arrangements down here in Jindabyne. I also sat with Angie, had dinner and had a limoncello, over which she said to me, you know, it was really hard to be in business on the weekend. She thought she opened for Jindabyne rather than for profit, because, you know, when she had to pay her dishwashers $50 an hour, let alone her waiting or her cooking staff, it was very difficult to make a profit. I think that it is technically a difficult situation and it does need to be unpacked and addressed. I think it also should be fed into your master plan. I think it's one piece of a very large puzzle and the big vision that you guys have for this area, which is just fabulous. So I would support working with you to unpack the puzzle and finding a solution that will allow you to be the regional powerhouse that you're trying to be.
Thanks, Sophie. Next, representing the United Australia Party, Chandra Singh.
Let me understand that we're talking about two agreements out there for the hospitality industry award, and there's another one called the Alpine Award. Would that be right?
Yes.
Yep.
That's not my
Okay. Now, I've stood in both sides of the table as a trade union leader, and as also as a manager, and then a small business owner, actually in Cooma. So I've looked at both sides and all sides. One of the solutions that was arrived at in Fiji was a tripartite forum where the unions, the employers, and the government got together in a forum like this and nutted out the various issues. And they were able to come to an agreement on what the wages would be, what the terms would be, and what the national wages rise is going to be, so that it was fair and acceptable to all parties. Because if you change one aspect of it here now, the people in Cooma or the shops or somebody else will say, hey, that's not fair. I want a bit of more, or same as that. So it's in that one forum, you may be able to solve the issue. So if we can come up with a solution, and to the government or the minister, and say, hey, this might work, you might get your way.
Thanks, Chandra. And our final speaker on this point is James Holgate, the independent candidate.
Thank you. Look, I won't pretend to be an expert on this. One thing you probably don't hear politicians here often enough say is that, oh, I don't know, I'll try to find out. But look, I take all of those ideas, I talk to people and listen and try and get, find a way through it. Very complex issue, obviously. I'll just make a couple of sort of observations, if you like. I lived in Singapore, where they employed regional, very low cost, I'd say almost slave labour cost for low skilled jobs, and that actually made their economy. It's like what happens in the US. A pound of strawberries there costs you a lot less than it does here because of illegal labour. So it's a real cost, and I understand that they wouldn't go. The US economy will probably crash without it. Basically, I think we need to have some faith in market forces. I certainly don't want to see any exploitation of anyone. But at the end of the day, I assume that as a business owner, on weekends, if there's nothing else open, then you're making good profits anyway. So it's not unreasonable for people to want to be paid more. I'd say more broadly about penalty rates, nurses and other essential services like that. I think, yes, I think small businesses, you should have the flexibility to choose how much you pay. Obviously, you need to pay enough to get people to turn up. But a lot of small businesses actually probably earn under the minimum wage anyway. When you add up all of the work you actually do, and I do the work I do a lot of it that's not I don't really get paid. I don't get paid for what I actually produce. There's a lot of admin and other stuff that I don't get paid for. So I'm not actually getting paid. I'm sure a lot of you don't get necessarily the minimum wage either. So it's a tricky issue, I admit that. I'm all ears.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Our next question from the floor comes from Olivier regarding healthcare.
Good evening, panel. Aged care in Jindabyne is a pretty hot topic and has been for the last couple of years. Give you a couple of statistics. The average population of Australia above 75 is 2.6%. So there's about 650,000 Australians that are over the age of 75. In the Monaro area, it's actually 2.2%, so a little bit below the average. In Jindabyne, it's 1.1%. Anecdotally, we could say that 50% of our over 75s had to leave Jindabyne in order to be able to have an aged care worth their dignity. The federal government last year in this budget allocated $60 million for capital works. $60 million out of a budget of trillions. How do you rectify that? I'd like to understand, each of you, what you think aged care needs, and particularly what can be done for Jindabyne.
Let's start with the sitting member, Mike Kelly.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, this is a really crucial issue for the whole of our region. We have, obviously a lot of aged care facilities. We're an attractive place for that, particularly coast and even in the southwest slopes. There are some wonderful facilities there, the high country. We have a real challenge, obviously, to meet the growing needs and demands associated with aged care. So we really need some bold initiatives now. Obviously, when we were last in government, we introduced the Living Longer, Living Better policy framework so that we could enable people to stay in their homes for as long as they possibly could. That was extremely popular. But what we see now is that there are 130,000 people on waiting lists for those in-home care packages. So that's got to be a serious target to be redressed if we return to government. The current government said they were addressing that by adding another 3,000 packages this year, 3,000 in the context of 130,000 on the waiting list, but the money for that came out of the residential care budget, so it's still a competitive pay pool. Obviously, the facilities is also a rising challenge because of the exponential increase in dementia. So those facilities now also have to be of a higher standard, and the people that are coming into those facilities require higher end care because they're coming in after having spent a lot of time at home later than they used to in residential facilities. So there's going to have to be an intensive capital effort in that respect, and cutting the residential aged care budget is not going to get us there in that respect. So there's going to have to be a serious focus on that as well, and that's why we've made the tax reform measures that we have to enable us to address those issues, and we'll have some more to say on that before the election in terms of our aged care policy, but it will be an intense focus for us.
Thanks, Mike. Let's hear from the National, Sophie Wade.
Aged care services are indeed an issue in Jindabyne. I spoke to the Snowy Mountains Neighbourhood Centre about their service, and they took the time to address this issue as well, that your locals need to have local services. It's an issue that is across the electorate. It's not just the sole issue, we've also got a need to put respite services in place as well across the electorate. I believe it's something that we need to invest both in the infrastructure and also in the workforce. So I would be obviously working with you to come up with an appropriate model. There's lots of successful models to running these aged care services across the electorate, so it would probably be great if we could work together and look at what's working and what's not working, find the money to put the infrastructure in. The issue of workforce, we've just released a policy in the last week. It's called the Aged Care Workforce Research Centre. I'm happy to forward you details if you'd like to know. Essentially, the purpose of that is to come up with a sustainable aged care workforce plan so that we can actually have appropriate staff in these centres.
Thanks, Sophie. James Holland, do you have a perspective on this?
We need to be a bit fair. We need resources. We do have an ageing population. We don't have a population policy. Our answer seems to be to basically encourage young, educated people from developing countries, exploit them, in other words. I don't blame people for coming from another country here who are young, they're educated, they've used the resources of a lot of other developing countries to come here, set up a family, we get the economic benefits. Yeah, sorry, I'm blaming all them all, but it's basically exploitative, and we've got a pond-sized scheme as far as population policy goes. And politicians, again, with political donations, aren't able to really address these issues, it seems to me, because they're beholden to big business and big pharmaceutical, retail, all those other areas that give them political donations. So look, we need to be feeding, and we need to spend money. We're all ageing. I think a great analogy I heard about the ageing population was it's like the way a python consumes a goat. It just sort of sits on it and eventually it'll pass through. But, again, we need to resource it. We need to make hard choices about where that money comes from. And we do, some things we can't do, or work out other revenue streams. And I'll probably cracking down on tax avoidance and big businesses not paying their tax and price transfer and all that sort of stuff might be a step in the right direction. But I'm all ears.
Thanks, James. Let's hear from the Liberal Party, Fiona Kofflois.
Thanks for the question. This is another one that every time I've been coming up over the last 6 months has been raised and we've been discussing. It is an essential area that we need to work on. Aged care is really critical. It's critical here and it's critical across the whole of the electorate. So I've gone and I've met with a number of aged care providers in Cooma, down at, a whole range, but primarily in Cooma, which I guess is the most relevant for here, and respite care providers. I've met with ones elsewhere to look at different models. I also met with Minister Ken Wyatt to discuss options to see if we could get money for Jindabyne for aged care, because all the numbers, when you look at it, you need more funding. What I found is that there are requirements within the legislation which make it difficult to directly fund an aged care facility from federal government funding, which truly amazed me. I hope he's not aware of that. So first of all, there's some things that we need to do in terms of getting some changes to legislation so that the money can come through more easily. When I get into federal parliament, I will be working to get those changes. That's the first thing, because we need to do it. We can also get funds other ways and work other ways to get the funding. What Sophie said about the aged care workers is critical. There has been more funding put into aged care workers because we do not have enough aged care workers for the existing facilities that we have. And so we need to increase the number of aged care workers. The government has put extra funding in and extra training in to train more workers, and that will be an important step. We need to take those things through in parallel. And I do look forward to working with you to get an aged care facility here, because it is needed, and because I know from my own family and from others that the ability to move into an aged care facility that is local rather than having to go away is critical. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Pat McKinley, the Greens have an aged care policy. Can you tell us some more?
Yes, indeed I can. I'm going to come at this from two different directions. First, excuse me, I'll get the right words. I just want to state that the Greens policy, in a nutshell, is to improve aged care through increased levels of care and improve staffing ratios. We've got a lot of details on the website, so I won't go into it anymore on that, but it's up there, it's up front. It is a priority. The money has to be found. It's not a matter of, oh, we'll find sources here or there. It's an essential service, and like any other essential service, it has to be prioritised. Okay? From a secondary perspective, I'll say my last paid job before being a councillor was as an aged care worker. I decided as a mature student to go and do a Cert 3, and I became a personal carer. Between my studying time, the voluntary work that I did, and then the casual employment, I know what the problem is. It is simply understaffing. Okay? It has been noticed that there are not enough trained people. I'll tell you one thing, you're not going to improve those numbers who are going to want to do that job unless you recognise the difficulty, the stress and the judgment level required of people in in those jobs. They are not paid enough. It's as simple as that. They're vastly underpaid for the responsibility they have. They're underappreciated, and they're now under fire as individuals and receiving venom in the street for their occupation. It's a bit of a tragedy. We need more staff. We need to commit that the funds have to be prioritised. Whatever it takes, that's what has to be allocated.
Thanks, Pat. And finally, Chandra Singh.
The non-industrial party is very much aware of the situation in the population. Aging population is going to be a big drain on the budget for future governments. People are getting older, they need care. One of the things that has been proposed is that we intervene as a government. So far, it has been the private sector and charitable organizations that are running most of the aged care facilities. It is about time the government did that. The funding cost is at present is so low that the government should not be able to have many problems in getting extra funding. In fact, the 10-year bond was quoted at such a low rate that actually people were paying us, or paying the government, to keep the money safe. If that is available, the infrastructure can be built and the government can organize the training of people to look after their aged care. So it's capital input is needed, that's the way to go.
Thanks, Chandra. Our final question from the chamber comes from Matt regarding small business.
Thanks, Lynn. So small businesses are quite rightly referred to as the lifeblood of the Australian economy, and we've got quite a number of thriving small businesses here, but we've got a lot that are struggling, and one of the things that they struggle with is the level of red tape. So filing BASs, increasing information that they have to provide either through tax returns, ABS surveys, which you're fine if you don't do, contractor reporting now, trying to weed out those who are doing the wrong things, so the burden's gone back on the small businesses. What are the candidates? My question is, what are the candidates going to do to help small businesses tackle this problem? Because small businesses don't have the ability to raise prices to deal with the extra labour that goes in. Inevitably, it's the owner or the owner's wife or husband, if it's the wife who runs the business, who spend the hours at home after hours trying to get this stuff done.
Let's start with the Nationals this time round. Sophie Wade.
Oh, the answer on that is everything I can do. I know your pain. I feel your pain. I have to add one thing to your list, and that's that small business clearinghouse change that's come in recently, which is just yet another burden on small businesses. We are being absolutely inundated with red tape. It is completely unnecessary. We need to work out how to streamline it. Yesterday in Coomera, I was just walking the shops, introducing myself to the businesses, and I do not lie, 3 business owners were extremely stressed because they had just had to do their quarterly BAS, and it had taken a real personal toll on them, and they were looking at their businesses seriously. One girl even said, I wish I could just sell it. After I asked, I said, how long have you been in business? She said, 8 years. And I said, you're doing well, you must love it. And she said, I wish I could just sell it. I left because I could see I was just distressing her talking about BAS. I would do everything I can to remove the burden on small business. You are absolutely right to say small business is the lifeblood, and I will be supporting you guys.
Thanks, Sophie. Pat McKinley, what's the Greens' perspective on this?
I think there's a very strong misconception out there that among a lot of business people that the Greens are not pro-business and they're anti-business. Quite to the contrary, one of the problems the Greens have is with very large international corporations, that kind of business, and the fact that they don't pay their fair share of tax. If they did so, perhaps there could be more people employed to streamline the systems and do that kind of work as the public servants should be doing, and free up small businesses to get on with their small business. Someone said the lifeblood of the economy. totally agree with you. It's uniformly the most evenly spread business economy throughout the whole of the country. When small business is impacted, it impacts everybody, including the many staff that they employ. So yes, I would do everything I could to get rid of that burden of red tape, shove it back on the bureaucrats who insist on it. You guys go and do it, and go tax the big guys so they can pay for your bureaucrats.
Thanks, Pat. Fiona Cockboys from the Liberal Party.
Well, my husband and I have two small businesses. One works in consulting and then the other one we sell a product, a masonry heater. One of the real challenges, first of all, is actually knowing what regulations you're meant to comply with, because it keeps changing and they keep adding things and you just don't know if you're complying. So the first thing to do on a practical perspective in terms of saying I will do everything I can is to make sure we have mechanisms to know what you have to comply with that are simple, even getting down to how much you have to pay somebody. If you employ somebody, it is a real challenge knowing exactly what you have to pay them. It's not easy. So that's the first thing, making sure everybody knows what you have to comply with, and we have a simple system for doing that. The second issue, when I've been talking to small businesses, is that you keep adding paperwork and the systems keep adding things and requirements. What happens is public servants add things and they don't take other requirements away. The best example I've seen so far is in smash repairers. And if you have your car, a kangaroo hits it, you take it into a smash repairers. The amount of paperwork that they do behind the scenes that I never knew about, which has absolutely no use and no value at all, is amazing. And they have to employ somebody just to do this useless paperwork. So we need to look at what the purpose of every piece of data that a small business is asked to collect and everything they're meant to fill in. How does it get used? And if it doesn't get used, we shouldn't be collecting it. And that's a really simple way to start cutting things to start with. But we need to go through it industry by industry. We need to be rigorous. We need to have industry doing it rather than just having public servants do it, because it's industry that knows what is causing the pain. And public servants, to be absolutely honest, and I'm sorry to those of you here who are public servants, don't understand the difficulty it causes. And most of what's collected is not used. Thank you.
Let's hear from Mike Kelly, representing the Labor Party.
Yeah, actually the public servants are the lifeblood of our small business in this region. We'd be lost without that, those holiday makers coming down from Canberra, etc. And that's why I'm so opposed to the decentralisation so-called policy, which is stealing from one part of regional New South Wales to pork barrel in another, which also led to the devastation of our Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. We lost 30% of our scientists out of that. So we want to make sure that we continue to have those well-functioning, centralised policymakers living in our region, so they can come here and spend money in your businesses. But also, I mentioned, I really understand perfectly that I've heard so much about this, what the Howard government's introduction of the GST did to you in relation to the BAS burden. It wasn't public servants that did that, that was the Howard government. So obviously, as I mentioned, when we got into government, we introduced a BAS easy system, trying to make the best out of that South here. But also, I think we can go a lot further. We're trying to improve the online way these things are administered and complied with. We also want to look at how we strengthen you in relation to the way you also have issues dealing with other contractors and making unfair contract terms illegal, and also to arm you in relation to your access to justice. We've got a special policy focus there that will enable small businesses to actually take on the big guys and get support to do that, so that it doesn't cost you a fortune, you don't get squeezed out by the big boys as well. But I put about, I think, $350,000 into the Business Enterprise Centre that services this region too, to enable those advisors to come down and work with you to talk through how you might get over these things and be more efficient and have less burden in that respect. But we need to do more. Obviously, I think the answer will probably lie in better technology to streamline those processes in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Let's hear from our independent candidate, James Holgate.
Thanks very much. Nice comment there about bringing in the GST. Well, Paul Keating was the first person I heard of talking about the GST, and then of course he politically opposed it. Good luck getting rid of it now. They're talking about raising it, but anyway, that's probably another issue. I actually did a lot of administration as a public servant over many years. It drove me absolutely nuts. I got audited and hassled for not checking the mileage done on official vehicles often enough. Now, that's not a waste of time on me providing a service to people. I don't know what was. It was a fine. I thought it was ridiculous. At the end of the day, I prefer the concept of trust. Trust you to do the right thing. And I guess if you get found out doing the wrong thing, then, maybe there's periodic audits or something, but I think you can be trusted to track how much money you're making and pay your tax. Really simple. I'd be all for doing that, and I guess it's a matter of the only crime is getting caught. I don't want to be flippant about it, but yeah, I'd be very keen to make it as simple as possible. I'm sure on an issue of trust, I don't know if our politicians can really say much when you look at Peter Slipper and Robin Bishop and others. I thought that was a great comment, and I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive. That's why I'm running. I want to be positive, but the comment, I think that taxpayers and people, you guys pay tax. Big business, a lot of them get away with not paying tax. But when Bronwyn Bishop said, "I didn't break any rules," when she used that helicopter, I don't know, and that just resonated with me personally anyway. But look, administration, again, the NDIS system would be a lot more efficient. There's a lot of money wasted on administration. So as a principle, I think I prefer people to be civilised rather than domesticated, if I could put it that way. You'd be trusted to do the right thing, and then I guess there's sanctions if you found out not to be doing the right thing. Let's let you get on with it. I like the small liberal concept on that front. Thanks.
And finally, Chandra Singh, you come from a small business background, but you represent a man of big business. What does Clive Palmer's United Australia Party have to say?
Hostile takeover.
I think Clive leaves all his paperwork to his accountants and lawyers. But the small business operators, they need to do a lot of the work themselves. Now, Matthew, I just want to clarify this. You have clients who have issues with the completion of the GST or BAS returns. Is that correct?
It's a combination of everything. There's an increasing amount of reporting you have to provide. So our system is a self-assessment system. So in theory, it is what James says. When the system was introduced,
When I started business in
much the same now, information-wise.
In 2005, I didn't know much about the preparation of BAS, etc. So I had to learn by talking to the bookkeeper and an accountant. We used MYOB, and then we found Xero was the best way to do it. And we were able to keep up to date with our BAS, no problems. Whenever we had any issues, we could always talk to other accountant or lawyer and get advice on that and solve those issues. One of the best advice I was getting was from actually the Victorian Government Small Business Advisory or Commission. They were very good. The website provided a lot of information. And so does the ATO. They actually are quite helpful if you really wanted to find out some things or have you with problems. You go to them and before the problem happens so that they will help you and work your way through it. So small business, if they have got problems with the red tapes, etc., talk to their accountant, let him take it up with the Chamber of Commerce and resolve it. In most cases, if it can't be done, then go to your Member of Parliament and say, hey, we've all talked together and we need this one sorted out.
Thanks, Chandra, and thank you to Gordon, Olivier and Matt representing the Chamber and representing the Jindabyne community. We open questions to the rest of the room tonight. If you are keen to ask a question, I'd ask you to raise your hand, stand, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from, and if you're representing a group or a political party. I'm really aware we haven't had any ladies ask a question yet, so let's start with you.
Hi, my name's Lisa Hoppen. Hi, my name's Lisa Hoppen. I live 24 kilometres south of Jindabyne. It's a place called Grocers Plain. I'm very aware of I've lived here for a lot of years. Many people don't know me. However, I am a photojournalist. I just recently did a piece for The Guardian about the Ngarigo burial grounds. Some of you may be aware of the fact that there has been a subdivision recently approved by Snowy Monaro Regional Council over the top of those burial grounds. My question tonight is about Snowy Hydro. And so, Snowy Hydro currently supplies only 3% of electricity to the grid. It owns energy retailers, Red Energy and Lumo Energy. The water in Jindabyne and Newcombine dams are mainly reservoirs for the Western New South Wales irrigators, i.e. cotton farmers. And now with the building of the pipeline between the Murray River and Broken Hill, the snowmelt rivers, the Murray River and the Snowy River, are providing water for the cotton farmers, who have notably fixed the system. The question I have are, what assurances do each and every one of your parties give to improve the system of granting water licences so that the equitable use of water prevents further damage to the circulation of water back into the environment? So, meaning that the reservoirs of Newcombine and Jindabyne basically take water out of the environment, okay? They go over to the Western New South Wales cotton farmers, and the Snowy River doesn't get any water.
Let's hear from our candidates on your question. Let's start with Pat McGinley from the Greens.
That's a nice one. Thank you. Good question. I can't talk in particulars about the information you've just given. It's the first time I've become aware of that issue in regards to the meltwaters that you're talking about. I can only talk in more general terms. And the Greens have a very clear policy that the environment is the number one factor, and while economic issues are very important too. Now you're talking about water being diverted from one part of the continent to another part of the continent for economic reasons. Those people, if they're going to sustain their businesses, have to get their water from somewhere. Okay, that balance, I think, the main problem has been today is that state governments have had too much control. They have to have too complicated agreements between the states to agree on anything, and we've seen that through the Queensland, New South Wales, South Australian, Murray type situation. I think the whole idea is that it has to be a federal issue because it is a whole geographic issue, and that would be my first thing. Get the power to the federal government to actually oversee those kind of disputes over where does the water go, how does the water flow, who benefits for it, and more importantly, who pays for it, because it is a resource that should be paid for.
Let's hear from Fiona Cockvoice, representing the Liberal Party. Water, a hot topic at the moment.
Water is always a hot topic in Australia, and it always will be. It isn't an easy issue to address because everybody wants more water. And so it is important that we have a really good legislative framework that protects the environment, that provides the water where it's required, and that monitors that and ensures that the regulations that are in place are actually applied. Now, one of the problems is that we don't necessarily think that the regulatory environment is being applied properly and being monitored properly. There is a lot of work that has just been committed to over the last 2 months to ensure that that occurs. I believe that we need to have a very strong regulatory environment. We have to have good planning to start with to know that the basis that we make the decisions on is correct. Then a strong regulatory environment, that it has to be monitored and that has to be enforced, and that's the key things. So for me, that's the really important elements. I don't know the details for the Snowy water going west in that context. I will find out the details and I'll learn more about it. But the other thing I would say, because I think the start of your question was about Snowy 2.0 and where it fits, is that the Snowy 2.0 doesn't take any more net water
out of the system. It basically takes one lot out and it then recycles it around. So it isn't going to exacerbate a problem in that context over anything that is already there. Thank you.
Mike Kelly, you've been a member for a number of years now. Your thoughts on water in the mountains?
This is a really good question. It's something that I was really passionate about in the early days working with the Snowy River Alliance and the community here. And as I mentioned, we put $50 million into purchasing that environmental water for the Snowy River. We were working well with the Victorian and New South Wales governments at the time to go further. You recall that there was supposed to have been a commitment to establish the Science Committee and look at issues to do with the Moama Weir, and there was the Moama borrowing account that was meant to have been repaid, etc. And so that agreement was reneged on, and the Science Committee was never established. We have to get back to that. It's vital that we have that committee that can guide us in what is necessary in relation to the environmental flows in the river. So it was a great pleasure for me to stand with you guys, the Snowy Alliance people, with Penny Wong down at Dalgety there, and to make that announcement, and then to watch those big releases, the 17 billion litres of the first flows. So it is a question of getting the balance right, of course, and you've got to deal with the drying circumstances we sometimes get. But in relation to the farming side of that equation, most of the cotton resource is actually in the north of the state. So it's really the broadacre farming that relates to the wheat and other growers down at this end of the system that the Snowy system supports. But there's a huge amount of progress we can make in relation to water efficiency, and I've studied this deeply with colleagues in Israel who only farm in arid or semi-arid circumstances. So the greater efficiencies we can achieve in our farming in southwestern New South Wales and Victoria and South Australia will assist us to get those greater environmental purchases back to the Snowy River system. I certainly want to see the effort go back into that as to where we left off in 2013 and get that back happening and get that science committee established as quickly as possible to guide us in what is particularly necessary for the river.
And finally, before we move on to our next question, let's hear from the Nationals' Sophie Wade. The Nationals were caned on water at the state election. Sophie, what's happening at the federal?
Lots, actually. Just in terms of the reference to the irrigation, a part of the engineering genius of Snowy Hydro is the fact that it does facilitate the movement of water into the food bowl. It's not just about electricity. It was designed to do that. In terms of, there's a number of aspects you asked the assurances for. We have referred all the water purchases to the Auditor General, and I will give you my assurance that I will take the report of the Auditor General and do what is required, as we have done with the Royal Commission into the banks, which was called by the National Senator, Rack Williams. I'd also like to note that today we have announced an ACCC review. We're looking at the operation of the water market, and we're looking to ensure that it is operating fairly and effectively. And I will give you the assurance that I will take the recommendations of the review and back those as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Who's next? Yes, sir.
My name is Peter Beer, local resident. I would like to know a little bit more personally about the half a dozen candidates we have concerning the responsibilities and duties of the federal government, not local, not state, which we're impinged on a bit at the moment. I'd like to know what our local federal candidates think are the two most important duties or functions of a federal government, and if they wanted to improve them, what services or resources would you cut from the federal government purse to improve those two services?
Thanks, Peter. Let's start with James Holgate, our independent candidate.
Think about it.
Sorry, the question is what are the two most important things that a federal government should do?
Yeah.
Well, I guess look after people and look after the environment.
What would you cut?
What would we cut? Well, the Greens would say defence, and the other side of that would be the exact opposite to that. Waste. I think that the Howard government threw a lot of money at middle class welfare, and that's got us into this tangle about franking credits. Look, at the end of the day, you've got to take money from somewhere to spend it, and that's a discussion that we need to have. What would you cut? You sound like it's a loaded question. I'd like to argue and discuss the merits of that. There's always this, we need more schools, more hospitals. We probably spend too much money on sport, but I don't think we should spend no money on the arts either. I'd like to spend more money on health education. I think that'd be a great investment in education more broadly. A sugar tax. What to cut? Great question. Look, I'm not going to pretend I know all the answers, but we could look for efficiencies. That's all I'll say.
Let's hear from Chandra Singh. Your two priorities at that federal level, Chandra, and what would you cut to fund them?
A whole bloody lot. Now, the party doesn't have any firm ideas on cutting things out, but there are areas that I am quite keen to look at is the military force. We're spending a huge amount of money building submarines that can't even chase the prey that they're supposed to be protecting us from. The diesel electric submarines worth $50 billion or $80 billion, something like that, is not going to achieve what it's designed for. That's one area that needs to be looked at. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Let's hear from Pat McGinley next door at the Greens.
Stand up. Where's the gentleman who asked the question? Okay, thanks. Two main issues at the federal level. I've already mentioned one of them, which is climate change. But it's not just, look out guys, climate change is coming, it's what do you do about it? And so the federal government, I think, has to, as number one priority for at least the next decade, which should be the main thing, is to try and transition from a fossil fuel-based energy system to a renewable energy system, okay? That's a big ask. That is a massive task, and that will take a massive amount of energy to do over the next 10 years. We've actually got a mud map from Plan E. It's got 40 pages. If you look at our platform on the website, you can go through that. It's got costings, etc. It's a start. It's accepting that someone's going to have to do this. It's not going to be anybody else except the federal government taking the lead, and it's got to be a priority. The second item you asked me about, and I would say, I'm sure you've heard the concept of equality of opportunity. Okay? Equality of opportunity for a fair society where everyone gets a fair go starts with quality education for every single person, every child in this country. So every child should have a quality education. It should be free to ensure that no one is disadvantaged. So you've got through secondary school, it should extend to TAFEs, and it should extend to universities. It's been done before, it can work. It would not be done overnight, it would have to be planned for, but that's where the direction I'd like to see this country go.
Thanks, Pat. Fiona Conroy's funding the work of government is the challenge. Where do your priorities lie? Where do the Liberal Party's priorities lie?
I think there's two priorities. The first priority is the economy. If you don't have a strong economy, you can't fund anything else. So for me, the highest priority for the federal government is to make sure that we are managing the economy in a way that we produce good returns, both for individuals and for the country as a whole. Because in that way you have money to invest in education, you have money to invest in health, you have money to invest in all the services that we want. Without a strong economy, we don't have that money. That was very clear under the Labor government when, for example, health was cut, education was cut. PBS, there was no more medications put into PBS. Strong economy meant that we were able to invest more in education, able to invest more in health, and able to start adding items to the PBS again. So economy is number one. Number two for me is the security of the country. That has to be done at a federal level. You cannot do it at a state level. So the security of the nation and the relations with foreign countries and foreign organisations has to be the second priority from my perspective for a federal government. In terms of how would I fund this, if you're putting more money into those, the economy actually doesn't require additional money to make it work well. It's a case of planning and good management. But how would you fund them? The two things for me are duplication, getting rid of duplication. At the present moment, we have a lot of duplication between the three levels of government. The Constitution has very clear responsibilities for each. Because we have duplication, we are not putting our money in efficiently, and you see a lot of blame between state and federal as to who is responsible for funding certain things. If we can clarify the duplication, get rid of that, it will result in greater efficiencies, less costs, and I think better service delivery. The second thing is the gaps in terms of some of the big businesses who are not paying their fair share of tax in Australia and are dodging tax. There has been a huge amount of investment by the current government in trying to retrieve that. I think we've got $16 billion back, might actually be 67, I can't remember which of the numbers it is, in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Mike Kelly-Bullshort has been very active in announcing some big ideas over the last 6 years. Where do the priorities lie for you? How will you fund them?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the critical two things, I guess, is dealing with the issues that are emerging from an ageing population, and secondly, in particular, undermining our position in terms of economic growth and generating more revenue is the lack of investment in our knowledge infrastructure. It isn't true that we cut education when we were in government. You know that. As I mentioned, it was 5.4 million went into our schools locally here, but we increased funding into those schools by 80.8%, and a capital investment program to help with the GFC of 13.2 billion, which was why there was an adjustment to the education budget here to reflect the out-of-program investment that was over the top of that. So we want to see the full Gonski investment, we want to see our restoration of our tapes, and we want to see, of course, the investment in early childhood, including 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, 15 hours a week guaranteed, introducing STEM-focused education into the schools, and making sure our teachers can teach STEM better and support them to do that. This is the key to the future. We are on an economic dynamic that is going on right now, a technological exponential curve. The jobs of the future are going to be critically involved in having our kids having their imagination stimulated and having their capabilities enhanced by that knowledge infrastructure. They need to be armed for those jobs of the future. So that will help us generate more revenue. But we are already putting out there the taxation measures that will be needed to underpin the expenditures that we require in education and in health and in aged care, which relate to the negative gearing reforms, capital gains tax trusts, and of course the franking credits issue as well. We won't give $80 billion to foreign multinationals because that will only create an infinitesimal improvement in the GDP. That's not where GDP improvement will come from. It will come from startups and innovation. That's where that growth will come from. That's why we need to focus on knowledge infrastructure.
Thanks, Mike. You'll have to forgive me, the water pump at home has failed and I'm getting questions on text message how to fix it. Has everyone had an opportunity to... Has everyone had an opportunity to speak? No, Sophie. Sophie Way from the Nationals. I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
The two most, sorry, Peter, thanks for that question. That's a really curly one. The two most important things in my mind for our government to work on, federal government to work on, is the well-being of our people and communities. And I think it's sustaining the future of our country for the generations to come. I think they're the drivers for us. What two things would I cut if I believe these are the two pillars? I don't think you can achieve these two pillars without sustaining some sort of equilibrium across a whole heap of areas. I think we've got to look at our food security, our health, our education, our housing, our environmental security, our well-being of our people, our economic security. All these things matter, and I don't think we can. We have to keep them all in equilibrium. And sometimes we can pull a lever here with a tax here, and my tax is better than your tax, or my promise is better than your promise. We jigger the levers a little bit here and there, but in the end, to achieve these two pillars, we have to keep an equilibrium. I would not say that any two of those things could be dropped or thrown out. I think we would have to work on adjusting each of them to maintain a balance to ensure we do look after our people and our future.
Okay, last, James Holgate. I didn't know I'd go first. Did you? Great, sorry, I've been distracted by my water pump at home. Where's our next question from the floor? Yes, up the back.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name's Linda. I'm remote community member. I'm working in the area of consumer health advocacy, and okay, we'll go without the mic. My question is related to the fact that we live in a rural community, which compared to our city friends and colleagues and family means we're going to die earlier. We're going to have a much greater risk of chronic disease, and we're going to have far worse health outcomes. Simple. We live. I know. Thank you. I thought I'd just, raise this issue. The Mark Diamond from the National Rural Health Alliance this week has said there is nothing apparent to him that addresses the needs and wants of rural and remote communities with regard to improved access and service provision. The Australian Commission in Safety and Quality in Healthcare is currently rewriting its Charter of Healthcare Rights. Access, safety and quality are integral to that charter. How are we going to get access, quality and safety in rural and remote communities for our healthcare? That's a simple question.
Who wants to start us off? Mike Kelly, sitting member.
Thank you for that question. When I surveyed the community, as a member from 07 to 13, one issue you reflected to me was health, and so that directed my effort. That meant that we were able to take advantage of the health and hospital funding agreement that our government entered into with the states. Now, that was a critical agreement, and it enabled not only capital investment into infrastructure, but also support for particular activities to increase. Now, that meant we were able to do not only the super clinic here, but the South East Regional Hospital, and of course many primary healthcare facilities like the Balmoral Street practice in Cooma, and to then, with a proper rollout of the NBN, look at the potential from telemedicine. So if we to return to government, and the state coalition government of Mike Baird and Andrew Constance complained bitterly of what the walking away from that health and hospital agreement was going to do. You remember Andrew Constance's comments about that. It was a kick in the guts. It was going to take $2.8 billion out of hospitals in New South Wales. So what we want to do is reinstitute that 50-50 split, instantly put $2.8 billion back into the equation, but also I announced recently down at the Bega Hospital, the first of what we will have is the tele-stroke networks investing in our hospitals, because what happens now is while you may have the thrombolysis capacity there to dissolve and remove clots, you don't have the stroke specialists to be able to use that capacity. So with the high quality telestroke network available, that will mean locally you can get the very timely assistance for stroke situations. There are 3,716 stroke sufferers and victims in this region. In 2017 there were 400 attacks alone, and a lot of people, 20% suffering and dying from those from lack of that service. So the emphasis on the telemedicine part of it is important. We'll also make sure, of course, that we address the lack of support staff in these facilities, which is another critical feature. But we need more mental health care beds in the region, which we did at the New South East Regional Hospital. But obviously that needs to be increased, and again, telemedicine can help with those online consultations. So we need to get the NBN rolled out properly and quickly to support and underpin that. But there's that investment when it's returned into the system, I think will help us address those issues. We're also planning to spread MRI facilities broadly around regional areas as well as an announced part of our program. So we see and hear and understand the problems of rural and regional health, and we intend to address it, because you're right, that inequity is not just and is not right for the people of Australia who deserve to be treated equally wherever they live.
Thanks, Mike. Let's hear from the Liberal Party next. Fiona Kofois.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that Mike has also agreed about the telehealth with the strokes. It was actually announced and fully funded on the 4th of April by the federal and the state government, so It's a duplication of what was announced in April. But it's great, we all see it as a highly positive thing, and that's good to move forwards. The federal government has also announced funding for an additional 30,000 doctors and 30,000 allied and health professionals for rural areas over the next 10 years. The difficulty we have in rural areas is actually getting medical practitioners here. That's the biggest problem. We don't have doctors out of hours. We don't have doctors on weekends. And we have difficulty in getting specialists. That's the biggest challenge. The local health district, I have met with them on several occasions and looked at the strategies that they have tried, and they've been applying a range of strategies to implement. Some of those are working and some of those aren't so successful. It's a case of getting clever ideas as well. So for example, one of the things they're doing is packaging up a professional job with a medical job, so that they will contact the local businesses and say, if you come, there's a job for a specialist here, but there's also a job for a lawyer or for an accountant if that's what your partner does, because that's why a lot of our doctors and specialists don't want to move into rural areas. There's no jobs for their partners. So we need to keep supporting that and looking at clever ways of doing it. We need to look at how we can train more health professionals in rural areas, and there are some strategies that we have in place for that, and there's also some that I'm trying to get associated with the new Eurobodalla Hospital. Because once you have somebody goes through their training in a rural area, the statistics show that they are far more likely to stay working in a rural area in the long term. When they go away to train in a city, odds are they don't return. So it's a case of having a range of different strategies, and in that way we can increase the number of health professionals. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And let's hear from Pat McGinley from the Greens before we take another question.
Yes, very good question indeed. Just to echo two things. I noticed the Labor Party in their platform talking about decreasing the cost for cancer patients. Okay, one of the key problems with people who get cancer is the fact that they have to leave their home usually to get treatment, obviously impacting more highly on regional people. But that applies not just for people with cancer, it applies to all sorts of illnesses. Fiona also mentioned Eurobodalla looking to have a new hospital. They're looking to have a level, instead of two small level 3 hospitals, have one single bigger level 4 hospital, which will attract the specialists to be there, which will be allowed to train people up, which will, again, as Mike says, make them stay there once they've got there. Between the two of you, get some good ideas there, I'll give you that. Thank you very much. The Greens are taking the view to get away from the particulars. One of the things we can do, just checking, is to actually expand Medicare. And one of the things, the reasons why people do not access good health services is not just the distance, but the cost of bridging that distance. So rather than getting treatment, they'll just say, I'll just put up with it. Okay? Or the bridging costs between Medicare and the specialist appointments, etc., is just too big impact on their budget. So they just don't take care of themselves. They can't afford to. So we're going to suggest, as the first thing, is that the Medicare be expanded to include dental care and mental health care, okay, as a first issue. So I'll leave it.
And Sophie Wade from the Nationals.
Thanks, Linda, for your question. And in terms of medical services in the rural and regional areas, of course, it's something that we will be working on for a very long time, but I do want to draw your attention to the work that has been done. We have a $550 million Stronger Rural Health Strategy. It is being implemented. It is introducing 3,000 additional doctors and 3,000 additional nurses and allied health professionals. We have opened or announced 3 new regional cancer centres. We have $100 million for rural and regional clinical trial centres, which will improve access to treatments. We've opened new training centres for doctors in regional areas for regional doctors, and we've done a significant amount of work in support for mental health in rural and regional areas. I don't say that this is the antithesis. I don't say that this is the golden silver bullet and answers everything, but there's a lot of work being done, and we will continue to work in this very important area.
Thank Thanks, Sophie. Let's move on to perhaps our last question for the night. Yes?
First and foremost, I'd like to say welcome from the Marigo traditional custodian owners of this land. The panel has really given me something to think about tonight because not one of you has mentioned the first people of this land. So that saddens me because moving forward we all should be quite aware that our children and our schools now curriculum has changed where children will actually learn about the first people. My question to you, first of all, I'll give you a little bit of a background. Similar to Ullaru's story, the Snowy Valley Council, if you're not aware, so I have to make you aware, which is Tumut, acknowledged a dual naming issue for Kosciuszko is a reminder of the Indigenous history and connection within Australia's highest mountain peak. My first question is, given the Snowy Valley Council leadership to this significant issue and the Ayers Rock Uluru naming precedent, what is your position on the Kanama Namaji naming proposal? Will you also be an advocate further consideration of this topical issue? And are you content with Tumut, Snowy Valley Council, looking after this major issue moving forward with the Jindabyne Go and the government coming up within 2 weeks of this election?
Let's hear from our candidates, perhaps starting with Fiona Kofois from the Liberal Party.
I live at a place called Ingham's Creek, which is at the base of what was Mount Dromedary and now has a new name, Goolga, which is the old Aboriginal name for the mountain. I believe that there can be both names for places and both can work well. So for me, I grew up with Mount Dromedary being called Mount Dromedary, and in my head that's what it is first. But for many people, it is Goolga, and that's fine as well. So for me, I'm quite comfortable with working for it to be both if that's what people want.
Mike Kelly from the Labor Party.
Yeah, firstly, apologies on behalf of the panel for that, but we were, I guess, relying on the generic acknowledgement of Ian, but we should have associated ourselves with that acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mike Kelly. I'd like to say thank you again.
Sorry about that. This is a really important question because it's part of that education process that we have to engage in for the broader community and resuscitating and reviving cultures too, so that we can communicate that to our future generations and our kids. And that, I think, plays out definitely in this story of place names. General Kosciuszko is the actual pronunciation of that name. Was an amazing person and a really fantastic international historic figure. I've read lots of biographies on him. He's just an amazing person who we should pay tribute to. But there are other ways to do that. And I do believe this landscape is special, and it's why I'm really keen to see the Bunyan Way project progress if we can, because I think we can then use that as a tool to re-educate the people about the significance of this landscape and begin that process of getting all Australians to have that spiritual connection with the land, because I do believe that once you achieve that, then you will be more readily able to adopt policies to support the environment, including support of real action on climate change. I think we do have to make sure that our landscape reflects the Indigenous heritage that we have here. I'm proud that most of our region does have Indigenous place names, including Jindabyne. Even Queanbeyan is actually an Aboriginal word. It is important to me that is the essence of what we are as Australians, and acknowledging that ancient heritage for 60,000 or more years is what it makes us special in the context of global cultures. So I think that is something that we bring people along with through broader consultation and understanding about how important that is in respect for the heritage of the landscape and the importance of the landscape to that heritage.
So will you support the naming, the dual naming?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Chandra Singh from the United Australia Party is keen to speak.
May I first apologise for not acknowledging the traditional owners of this place. The saying goes that the victors write history, and the same goes for names and places. We've changed the name and accepted the name Threyasrapan to Uluru. People have changed, or the Chinese government have changed the name from Peking to Beijing, and the Indian city of Bombay to Mumbai, and it's been accepted. So if the people of this area, the traditional owners, would like to change the name, then please go ahead. We will have no objections from us.
Pat McGinley from the Greens.
Thanks. Yes, thank you for your welcome as well. There's two elements to this. The first one, I didn't know about the local issue, so I won't pretend I did. No idea it was an issue. I now know it does, so I'll have to revert to the principles rather than the particulars. In principle, I agree with the dual naming, wherever it may be, so long as that is the will and the determination of the local Aboriginal people. If they are driving it, that is the impetus for me. And I think it's part of a broader picture. The statement from the heart was mentioned. Okay, a lot of people don't even know that happened. That all those peoples from all the Aboriginal communities from Australia got together, spent all that time together, came up with that beautiful one-page statement from their heart about what they believe the future of this country should be together. If you don't know about it, people, just Google it. This is a wonderful one-page statement. Part of the outcome from that statement of the heart was the idea of the Aboriginal peoples having their own voice in Parliament, a direct voice in Parliament. I don't think that's through yet. What I'd like to see is that there be a unilateral party political process where all the parties who happen to have a seat in Parliament get together to promote that and get it happening, so that there can be more the voice of self-determination of Aboriginal people, not us telling them what they should be doing, or here's a good idea. Let's hear directly from you, directly in the Parliament.
Sophie Wade, if you become the member for Eda Monaro, you support a dual name for the hill to the west of here?
First of all, my sincere apologies, you are right to call us on that. We will do better next time. In terms of my position on the dual naming, I think it's a beautiful idea. And I hadn't heard of it from the Snowy. I've done a lot of work over in the Snowy Valleys, but no one had mentioned it. I would 100% support it if I had the privilege of being the MP for Eda Monaro. The second part of the question, I lost. I was so wrapped in the first part.
Snowy Valley, the article went to the paper, local paper on Monday, and yeah, are you content that the Snowy Valley Council actually take on the issue, or do you feel that you actually should be a part of changing that and supporting them to do so?
So they've come up, was it the local Aboriginal community there that have driven this, or is the Snowy Council itself? The Ngarigo have actually commenced. Well, I think that the Ngarigo should continue that with the full support of the MP, doing everything they can to facilitate that. I've got three pillars I think the MP needs to be responsible for: fixing the problems, strengthening the community, and creating new opportunities. And this one is 100% about strengthening the community, doing the right thing.
Thanks, Sophie. And finally, James Holgate, Independent.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. I apologise too, of course. I was going to mention, as is unfortunately the case in reference to Indigenous issues generally, and I think it's look, Indigenous Australians have been wronged in history, and there are people who don't seem to want to accept that. Pauline Hanson, for example, talking about, oh, that's not Australian society, when they did the welcoming ceremony for the Commonwealth Games. I would have liked to have reminded her that actually, post-invasion, or however you want to refer to colonisation, we've been here about 2%. So 2% of the If 98% was Indigenous, that would be a fair reflection. I've got a very good friend who's an anthropologist who works very heavily on native title. I'd like to see that sped up, but that's not necessarily equitable. These issues are very, very, very complex. But no problem at all. Kosciuszko, whoever that Polish blow-in from 5 seconds ago, did not discover that mountain. So 100%. I mean, I refer to Uluru and everything. And, I think we're very, very blessed in this country to have the longest continuous culture. We should celebrate it more. I think we're actually doing better than when I was a kid. But anyway, I humbly apologise as well.
Thank you. I hope you can forgive me. We've run out of time to take questions from the floor, but our candidates will be here for you to speak one-on-one with at the formal conclusion of our meeting tonight. Now is an opportunity for our candidates to give a 1-minute wrap-up, some closing remarks, and we'll start with Chandra Singh from the United Australia Party.
Today you've heard a range of views from the political parties here, and in the last few weeks you've been inundated with claims and counterclaims of the parties putting in that my tax cut is bigger.
It's my
This is out there.
It's not
Yes, whatever it is, mine is better than yours. And you keep on getting this, and you've been getting it for the last 50, 60 years. And the result has been the same thing over and over. You get the same people, and they do exactly what they want to do. The promises that they have made in the past is forgotten. If you wish to have the same again, go ahead and vote for them. But if you want to change things, you have to go to somebody else. It's up to you to decide.
Thank you. Let's move down the line. Pat McGinley from the Greens.
Thank you. 1 minute. Okay. One issue very quickly I'd like to raise that didn't come up is just the issue of homelessness. I find it astonishing that in a country which is still one of the wealthiest in the world, that we still have people who do not have a roof over their head at night. If one person like that, something's wrong. Also the affordability for younger people to get into a housing market. Okay? It's getting harder and harder. We're having a split in generations where you've got older people with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 homes, and the younger generation, if they're not blessed with an inheritance, find it very difficult to get that first home and can barely afford rents. Secondly, pure politics here. If you like some of the Greens policies, don't consider voting one a waste of a vote because you think, well, they'll never get in anyway. The more number ones we get, the stronger, if you believe in our policies, that gets through to the government of the day. If that government of the day gets in due to Greens preferences or because of people moving over to the Greens from their side, they will take note of that. We will have more influence. They will change their policies. If we don't get in, who cares? If the policies change for the better of Australia, job done.
Thank you, Pat, for your closing thoughts. Fiona Kofois from the Liberal Party.
Thank you. This is the electorate I grew up in. It's been my home. It's where my heart is. I would be honoured to represent you, and I can guarantee that if you give me that privilege, you will not get a candidate who will work harder for you and fight for you for the better of this electorate. For me, the reason I'm running is that I want to make sure that our children do not have to leave this electorate, their communities, when they finish school, that they have the choice to stay, that we cease bleeding away our lifeblood. I want to make sure that our communities remain livable. The reasons you came here are the reasons that you want to stay, and that moves on into the future. I believe that the role of your federal member is to work for your community. It is to represent you and fight for you and the betterment of this electorate. It is to integrate local, state and federal government levels and work for your good. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. The City Member representing the Labor Party, Mike Kelly.
Thank you, Ian. I guess two things to finish up on. We didn't get to talk much about climate change, but right here, right in this spot, you are the canary in the coal we have further 2 degrees of warning, we lose this skiing industry up here. And if you sit down with the Snowy Hydro people, they will take you through the data. They've been collecting it for many, many decades. And we are thinning the snow. It's rising higher in the levels on a trajectory. If you draw a line through it, we'll have seasonal variations, but the trajectory is all bad. And that is half the economy of the Monero, and it's basically almost all of your economy. That's a $2 billion industry that will be lost. So this is a critical decision point. If we do not make the right decision here on serious climate change action, it may well begin to be too late. So I ask you to consider, yes, our kids and their grandkids when you cast your ballot in this election. Time has run out. Secondly, I would say, I would finish by saying, why change? Remember, go with who you know is what I would suggest. We changed once and that didn't work out too well. So I'd say stick with who you know. Thank you.
Next is the National Sophie Wade.
Hi, thanks for having us here tonight. It's been really good to have such a great range of questions. I'd love to represent you guys. You guys have very big ideas. As you. I think you are striving to be, you're already one of the great industries of this Eden Monero. You're striving to be quite exceptional and you've got a lot of energy about it. I think you need to be supported by an MP in that. You need to make sure that when people come here, they have a brilliant experience, that they're safe, that they move around it efficiently, that the businesses are prospering. They also need to make sure that when they go home and they talk about it to others, they talk about all the great reasons to come back here and to come visit. You will need the support of your federal MP. I know, Mike, you think you're the only one that can do a good job.
Don't say that. I just say I've got a track record.
You've got a track record. I say you know exactly what you're getting with Mike, but with me, I can show you more.
And finally, James Holgate, Independent.
And of course, with me, you get the best of the lot. I'll pick and choose. I don't want to sound like Groucho Marx, who was asked principles. Yes, of course I have principles, but if you don't like them, I do have others. Look, I've walked around and a lot of people have been saying, look, have a crack, have a go. I've really been disappointed in the 2 stints of the last 2 federal governments that we've seen. They've been pretty appalling, really. So, look, it's a great liberal democracy that we live in. When someone like me can come along and have a crack, but I assure you that I have got good life experience and can make good decisions, and I'm above politics. I'm not taking any political donations. I'll work on what's the long-term best interests of the country. I don't care where the ideas come from. I don't care who gets the credit, but I can assure you that I've seen a lot of what goes on around the world, and by good judgment, I'll pick the best of the lot. Don't care who gets the credit. So put 1 at the bottom, and it's easy. Just work your way up. Start 1, you can work your way up to 8. I am marked as low as possible by the majors. I take that as a great compliment. Thanks very much. But anyway, we'd like to see you.
Thanks, James. One of the things that's really struck me tonight is the size of Eden Monero. We've heard about health facilities in the Eurobodalla and Bega. We've heard about issues here in Jindabyne and even in Tumut. These are the people that want to represent this vast landscape, all those different communities. It takes great ticket to stand up as a candidate and be here to wave your flag and speak the way they have tonight. Please thank our candidates for being here. Now, if you haven't had enough politics for a Friday night, when you get home on Sky, the Leaders' Debate is on. Bill Shorten v Scott Morrison on Sky TV later tonight. Thank you so much for turning out and taking part the way you have. Thank you also to the Jindabyne Chamber of Commerce. Happy voting on the 18th of May.
Just to remind you, you do have an opportunity to speak for a short while with the candidates that are staying on this evening. And then I'd remind you that there are the Go Jindabyne workshops in a couple of days' time.